Let's face it, when a company as big as Blizzard goofs up, the whole world notices. And despite the mass appeal of their games, many fans still haven't forgotten Blizzard's past or current controversies. These are some of the company's worst scandals to date. Ingwai Blitzchung was one of Hearthstone's top players. He had been playing the game for 4 years, ultimately taking part in the 2019 Hearthstone Grandmasters event, where he earned some serious winnings. And then everything went south. During an official interview broadcast to Twitch, he took the opportunity to express his support for the Hong Kong protests raging in his home country. Because of this, Blitzchung was banned for a year, his winnings taken, and the 2 casters who interviewed him were fired. Following this hugely controversial decision, #BoycottBlizzard began trending on Twitter, and many longtime players deleted their accounts en masse. Blizzard stated that Blitzchung's ban was because players aren't supposed to make statements that bring up disputes or call out certain groups. But the internet at large called out Blizzard for taking China's side in the Hong Kong conflict. Inside Blizzard, employees have staged walkouts, even papering over the plaque on the Irvine office's org statue that states, "Every voice matters." They too believe that the company caved to China because of the money Blizzard makes there. Blizzard says its actions have nothing to do with China, but this statement hasn't convinced many fans. Following Blitzchung's ban over his pro-Hong Kong statements, Blizzard tried to mop up their PR mess by reducing the ban and reinstating his prize money. However, the internet was again furious at Blizzard following another ban, this time of 3 American university players who had been given the cold shoulder by Blizzard after they held up a sign during a stream which said, "Free Hong Kong, boycott Blizz." Blizzard took its sweet time throwing down the ban hammer on these guys. Even after their message of protest went public, they weren't banned until a week later. One of the players, Casey Chambers, told CNN about the delay. "It was hypocritical for Blizzard to punish Blitzchung's pro-human rights statement, but not our clearly anti-Blizzard protest. Obviously, taking so long to ban these players really didn't do Blizzard any favors, and they didn't exactly win much support when they did ban them either. The fact is that Blizzard banned players for making statements that many people feel sympathetic toward. Even if the company hadn't discriminated so blatantly with its bans, it wouldn't have been a good look." It's probably fair to say that Blizzard makes a lot of money. Like, a whole lot. In fact, parent company Activision Blizzard enjoyed a record year in 2018, earning $7.5 billion in revenue, which far exceeded the company's internal expectations. But despite making cash hand over fist following the fanfare of their legendary record year, Activision Blizzard announced that they would be laying off 8% of their staff. Approximately 800 people would lose their jobs as a result. While many had heard rumors of a potential company-wide restructuring, employees nonetheless felt gutted by the callous way in which this news was delivered, so soon after the bigwigs celebrated their record year. These employees understandably felt like the company saw them as nothing more than numbers. Both junior and senior employees who had sunk more than a decade into the company were let go, and inside the offices, no one knew who was next. Many employees even took to Twitter in order to job search, knowing their time at Blizzard was up. The Horde and the Alliance have been adversaries ever since World of Warcraft began, but neither faction ever really became the bad guys of the game. Each group had their own motivations that resonated with players, and this sympathy bloomed into loyalty that grew and grew over many years of play. But that all changed with the release of Battle for Azeroth. Fan-favorite character Sylvanas Windrunner is the latest Horde leader to make a sudden heel turn and decide that committing war crimes is cool for some reason.
Burn it. Burn it!
In a controversial move, Blizzard had the Banshee Queen throw an epic tantrum that led to the destruction of Teldrassil, home of the Night Elves. Horde players were forced to invade alongside her, and many players were uncomfortable with their new villainous role. This controversy was further compounded by a number of issues with the actual gameplay, making Battle for Azeroth one of WoW's most poorly received expansions. In the early days of World of Warcraft, a player named Sarah Andrews wanted to start an LGBT-friendly guild, but she was promptly informed by Blizzard that this was in breach of the game's terms of service. In an official statement, the company explained, "While some language in and of itself may not be offensive, it may incite certain responses in other players that will allow for discussion that we feel has no place in our game." Blizzard later apologized to Andrews and insisted that its current policy was under review. Maybe they forgot to complete that review though, because in 2019, Blizzard again came under fire for forcing a guild called Gay Boys to become Guild ZFXPK. According to emails sent to guild members, this was done because players were reporting the guild's name as inappropriate. Members acknowledged that this was one way they were often harassed, telling Blizzard, "Giving in to their demands only means that you are siding with them as a company, which, after a decade of playing your games, is a surprise to me." The name was reinstated, but the guild was warned that an automatic name change might happen again. What's it like to work at Blizzard? Well, according to one former employee, it was a living hell. Julia Murillo Hoya worked as part of Blizzard's esports team, focusing on Hearthstone tournaments. He claimed that for months he was harassed at work, specifically by a female employee who made continual racist claims that because he was Latino, he must be sexist. If that sounds like the kind of thing you'd usually take to HR, then you'd be right. And that's exactly what Murillo Hoya did. But it didn't help. In fact, seeking help through official channels seemed to backfire on him. He found that he was getting negative performance reviews after years of praise, and was even criticized for not being a team player. All this, on top of his grueling work schedule, served to seriously impact his mental health. Murillo Hoya left the company, and didn't tell his story until he saw the celebration around the announcement of Soldier 76's sexuality. He wrote, "The reason why it triggered me wasn't the message, but who it was coming from, Blizzard Entertainment. The idea of inclusion, of representation, and every voice matters and think globally never meant that for me and other people of color I have spoken to." Long before the launch of WoW Classic, there was Nestarius, a private fan-made server that took away all the bells and whistles of later expansions and gave players a chance to play the game in its original form. But Blizzard eventually shut down Nestarius, drawing criticism from fans. Obviously, Blizzard was entirely within its rights to shut down Nestarius, since World of Warcraft is their intellectual property, and they're free to do what they want with it, even if that means disappointing fans. WoW's executive producer said at the time, "If we could push a button and all of this would be created, we would. However, there are tremendous operational challenges to integrating classic servers, not to mention the ongoing support of multiple live versions for every aspect of WoW."
And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
This whole hullabaloo happened back in 2016. Now fans are able to get their nostalgic Nestarius experience through WoW Classic, but are required to pay Blizzard for the service. Looks like they found that button after all. Let's face it, Blizzard has something of a reputation for being kinda money hungry. It's not enough that they make a considerable amount of cash off of their millions of players either. Apparently, they need to suck even more money from esports teams, and that seems to have been the cause behind several esports organizations dropping their professional Overwatch teams back in 2017. At the time, Overwatch's professional scene seemed to be the next big thing, and yet well-established esports organizations were giving the game the cold shoulder. Why? Well, it might just be because Blizzard was asking them for a $20 million franchise fee. To address all the scandalized tittering about this outrageous number, Blizzard firmly refused to give a straight answer. Rather than denying the figure, Blizzard talked about the company's ambitious plans, growing community, and the wider esports ecosystem. At the time, Blizzard told Kotaku, "Anyone who knows Blizzard understands how deeply we care about the communities around our games." BlizzCon is supposed to be a celebration. After all, everyone is there because they love the games that Blizzard produces. Unfortunately, some of those fans are a little more, fanatical than others. For example, did you know that Cannibal Corpse frontman George Corpsegrinder Fisher is into his Blizzard gaming? Well, everyone at 2011's BlizzCon found out when the convention screened a video of Fisher proclaiming his love for all to see in an expletive, slur-laced interview.
The Alliance! Die, you emo...
Blizzard proudly showcasing a video that gives Alliance players terrible advice at the official company convention isn't exactly a barrel of laughs. And sure, Fisher doesn't represent the company officially, but the video was still part of the official showcase at BlizzCon. Then President Mike Morhaime apologized via a letter to website Gay Gamer. He wrote, "It was short-sighted and insensitive to use a video at all, even in censored form. The language used in the original version, including the slurs and use of sexual orientation as an insult, is not acceptable, period." You can say that again, Mike. Back in 2014, Diablo 3 featured an infamous auction house that undermined one of the game's core tenets. That's what Blizzard production director John Haidt said at the time, at least when the devs shut down the house for good. So what was so sinful about the auction house? The fact that it essentially made Diablo 3 into a pay-to-win scheme that ruined the game for many players who didn't have the cash to keep up. Diablo 3's auction house essentially became a place for players to fork over real-life cash for powerful weapons. Players have been doing this outside the game for years, trading items that took time and effort to retrieve for money. Blizzard just wanted to give players a platform to do so in-game. So what what could possibly go wrong? Well, people stopped playing for one. The aim of the game, other than defeating demonic hordes, is to level toward obtaining powerful weapons that are so tough to come by because they require such time and effort to earn. Thanks to the auction house, players could forego the core gameplay, leaving them with no motivation to continue. StarCraft and Warhammer 40,000 are two separate games produced by two separate companies that nonetheless have some striking similarities. The Marines of the two games both have massive armor with rounded shoulder braces. At a glance, you wouldn't even know they were from separate games. The psychic Protoss aliens in StarCraft also look like the first cousins of Warhammer's Eldar, who are also psychic by the way. Oh, and the Intersect Zerg of StarCraft are also clearly inspired by Warhammer's Tyrannid, right down to the fact that both are controlled by a hive mind. All this has been a point of contention between fans for years. Did StarCraft rip off 40k? From a distance, it sure looks like it. The two games may have numerous differences, but their similarities are so obvious that it's hard not to feel that Blizzard owes Warhammer's Games Workshop a pretty significant debt. Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more SVG videos about your favorite games are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.